So I wanted to get KK back on stage because this guy understands technology more than most people you'll ever meet, and can name you the top 200 applications in the world and all that sort of thing. But I thought it'd be great for you to spend some time talking to our audience today around this digital dichotomy and this sort of thing. But maybe you want to just start off telling us a bit about yourself and what's changed in the last few years in our industry.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Phil. And you're trying to set me up too much. You've been overtly nice. I'm still a curious learner. That's what I am. I'm still trying to figure out so many things. Every day something or other keeps popping up. The last 4 years, interesting. The last time we had a conversation was about 2018, just before the pandemic, right? And I think what's changed, I think the big thing is the pandemic itself, correct? I think it's become the #1 digital transformation agent, whichever people thought. Things like, it's very interesting, when we started having pre-pandemic cloud conversations, it was always why cloud, what cloud, which cloud, and then lo and behold now, the question is now how cloud, and now they're trying to figure out, okay, which all aspects, and now it's becoming like utility. But again, net, what I really see has changed is a couple of things. One is the realization that tech is not a CIO agenda. I think that's a big thing. It's before people used to have CIO as the tech custodian and a default, and I think different industries had those things, but it's now technology is in some cases core of every business. It effectively is the business, and even in the finance session in the morning, a lot of the sessions are very clearly, the imperatives are quite clear that the decision making is quite distributed, but you still need to have a more platform thinking. So companies which are thinking more around tech as a business platform and then moving away into this model that controlling everything centralized, but making it more distributed, but putting some common underlying hooks to allow a commonality of how they engage with their business. That's the big shift which I'm seeing. So the decision making has become fairly distributed.
Okay, so more distributed decision making. I mean, we were talking about these roles are shifting, aren't they, between the chief marketing officers now, the chief experience officer, and various other issues. And the chief digital officer, that one seems to have fizzled out a bit. But getting back to this digital dichotomy, everyone wants to drive out cost, transition in a great hurry, and experience innovation at the same time. How do we generally start to get there, in terms of, and what are you experiencing with your client conversations?
So it's interesting because I end up seeing two sides of the conversation these days because of one being in the large services side, which is both IT and engineering. And there's a very interesting aspect I'll touch upon of what we're seeing with engineering services, because and especially in certain industries of how they're looking at tech. And then trying to build a software business, which is very interesting to see how customers are looking at tech and adoption of software and how they're building that whole piece. So the dichotomy, I think the morning panel, I think there's a very interesting statement which talked about the dumbbell, correct? The two ends of the dumbbell. And which effectively is that the classic CIOs, I use this term called IT, BT, and OT. I've been using this. I avoid the word digital because then the question is where we analog before, if everything else was digital. I think, but if you go back to the quantum computing era, it's completely different. There's a lot of analoging coming up back. So, but the fact is, the traditional IT spend was always an SG&A spend. It was like, okay, IT was revenue, direct cost, indirect cost, and IT was always budgeted like that. A couple of things started to change. The first thing is this whole term, what I call as business technology. Like today, MarTech stack decisions. Tell me a CIO involvement in that. Pretty much very little other than integration, identity, core systems touchpoint. Pretty much the MarTech stack decision has gone off. Pretty much a CMO, and they're buying so much tech effectively, which is similarly happening in a lot of areas. A lot of the RPA decisions, as you saw in many of the spaces, which I think RPA exists purely because of inefficiency of BPM and workflow systems. It shouldn't exist. In my view, it should be a capability in a workflow platform. It's just become so big purely because of way we architected and built systems over a period of time. So decisions are shifting. So hence, the dichotomy here is I want to cut cost and the cut cost, efficiency, improvement, it's all happening on the classic IT areas. What's happening is that anywhere tech is becoming part of COGS, of cost of goods sold, which effectively means, and pretty much I have a view because we run one of the largest e-commerce engines which we took over from IBM and modernized and did a lot of work. Last year we ran about 270 billion of transactions on that platform, correct? 270 billion of B2B and B2C transactions, large ones, grocery to retailer to B2B. When you go and talk to the e-commerce leaders, for example, the way they look at tech is completely different. For them, this is okay. Can I get this capability? Can I get this piece? And can you add this capability which will help me improve revenue? Or can I bring marketing and commerce closer to each other so that can I take promotions and offers and apply it to both a prospect or a suspect or then to a customer who's already buying? So which effectively starts to mean that the tech decision on the other side, they're saying, hey, don't talk to me about cost. Tell me, if I invest on X, how will it impact? So that's the third. And the third thing which you're saying is especially this whole dark area on OT, especially in asset-heavy systems. The amount of tech spending which exists in OT, you'll be amazed and surprised, it's equal to the IT spend. They've been putting that under a different bucket called OT, but the amount of tech, infrastructure, network, apps which exist in that world is. So hence this whole dichotomy for me is that if you look at from an IT lens, yeah, there is this dichotomy, but when you start to look at line of business or CXOs taking decisions, they're saying, hey, what is the tech intensity of my business? Where can I invest in the right way? So that's the whole view on dichotomy. So it's going to continue to exist. It depends on which side you are in of the dumbbell.
No. So what do you think are the key technologies that are going to shape the industry over the next decade? I mean, we touched on low code earlier and ChatGPT and metaverse and things like that. But what do you think are the ones that are going to really shape our industry as we evolve?
So we just published this tech trends report. We do this every year. Last 6 years we've been tracking this. But I step back and look at, there are things which are happening now, okay? Which is a lot of tech which is going to come in, you keep adding. But if you step back and look at, I think you have to look at what's the fundamental tech which is actually impacting the shift over the next decade. So I think I break this into two buckets, Phil. The first is look at what's the fundamental things which is very important because ChatGPT exists purely because of some of the fundamentals. The first thing is this whole thing called ubiquitous cloud. I don't want to use public, private, or whatever. It's a ubiquitous cloud. There are going to be varieties now. We've got sovereign, telco, edge, hyperscaler, edge, all complexities. That's a continuous continuum is happening. But what it's really done, it's provided access to significantly high processing at a fairly easy to access scenario. And hence, you're able to see a lot of rapid innovation happening using this underlying stack. ChatGPT, if you go back and exist the LLM model training, I think there's very interesting data which came in. $370 million was spent by OpenAI just to train the English language model. I know who got majority of the money? Microsoft, because it was trained on Azure. So had there been no Azure, what would have they done with an LLM model? They had to build a massive HPC farm with massive amount of GPUs to stick in to go and build that, which effectively means that ability to build, innovate, and rapidly create, that's one piece. The other end is the connectivity. I think we're taking things for granted, but I think with 5G rollout, 3G is slowly going away in many parts of the world. And effectively, these days, we go and talk to a 12-year-old kid. If you look at their Maslow's law of hierarchy, the parents take care of food, water, shelter, and other things, correct? They're not even worried about that in this world. They're saying, okay, Wi-Fi, broadband speed, that's their base expectation, correct? The first thing the kids do is we go on 12, 13 years, they run Ookla speed test and say, is this a good hotel to stay? Is this a good place to stay? Now people are now searching broadband speed checker postcodes for looking at where they want to go, correct? So that's the big shift which has happened is connectivity is at scale, which is now opening up all possibilities. Limitless experience, metaverse, all these things can happen when you have ubiquitous connectivity, cloud and connectivity at scale. Right. And then there are fundamental things like cyber, green, sustainability, tech. And I'm really excited on two things down the decade. One is space tech. I think there are very interesting things happening around that. And the other thing, just because of my little bit of personal affinity, I think, is quantum computing. I think I've been actively involved in that for the last few years. it is fundamentally, it can shift things in a very different way if you start to reimagine how we can compute.
How far away are we from actually using some quantum applications, do you think?
We are in the stage in quantum what we call as NISQ. It's a noisy intermediary state quantum. The challenge is that our world, what we see in physical world is very relative. And we like to organize things. That's what fundamentally we are good at, correct? But if you go and start to look at what quantum, it's fundamentally built around chaos, correct? It's fundamentally built around quantum mechanical properties. I think you have annealing systems today, which you can use to a certain level for a certain kind of algorithm use cases. I think 2025, 2026, you will start to see, just like if you go back 20 years back, you used to have a CPU and an FPU, then came a GPU. Think of an equal analogy of a QPU kind of a system. You will be able to use quantum algorithms in context with classical algorithms. But I think few years, the rapid pace of innovation is very interesting. There is a startup which is in Silicon Valley, which is stealthily funded. They've already got $900 million of funding. They're using optical photonics to do quantum. If they can crack that piece, it'll be very interesting because you can get a quantum computer in a rack, not like in a big room. So I think so there's some very interesting innovation happening in this space.
Interesting, yeah, because we spoke a bit earlier about the advancements in AI, and I've been interested in the amount of processing power things like GPT is going to use up as this feels like it's roller coastering very aggressively.
Yeah, and it's going to create an energy problem for you, correct? I think some point in time what people don't realize is that one is the Moore's law.
Yeah.
The other extreme is that the way that you're going to start consuming computing power, you'll reach a point in time where you have to start to look at alternate computing models, because I think we've already crossed the airline industry, correct? Collectively as now the biggest carbon emitter, correct? Which people don't realize that the amount of processing computing power which we are using. So I think that will bring some level of different perspective on how you can do DNN and those kind of compute models, which a quantum computer can handle in a very different way compared to a classical model.
Right. But where do you see these algorithmic models going, particularly around generative AI? Do you think that is going to continue spiraling and driving more and more business development, business applications? Or?
I think maybe this is my view, correct? Yeah. I'm still learning, always. You look at the ChatGPT, and again, that's since morning I've heard at least 6 times ChatGPT, and even then corridor conversations. There is a public ChatGPT which was built around a LLM model, which is using public data sets. And it got launched pretty much at the right time, just before World Economic Forum. So I think in Davos this year was very interesting. The whole theme of conversation everyone was talking about is ChatGPT, correct? But if you really see the value of that, it has a big consumer value. I think from a Microsoft standpoint, they see a big value of hooking this around Bing so that they have something to keep Bing re-energized, or generative Bing, I would say, Bing generated. So at least they have a better story point to at least start competing with Google in the search space, because it's a completely different. That was their initial interest. Interestingly, their interest, which started in OpenAI, was all around Codex, if you go back. And people forgot about that, by the way. June last year, GitHub Copilot got launched. And I think if there is a real value use case just coming out there, and talk about low code, I think the real value is that if you have Copilot kind of an approach where you are able to code along with like a pair programmer, like an AI pair programmer, I think that was the real value, but that got lost in translation in the whole noise. I think the real value of generative AI is going to come in when you apply to your data. I think yesterday Google pre-GA Bard again, so I think the whole noise around that. I think you're going to see a lot of these pieces coming in. I think the value is, I think what Microsoft is doing with generative AI in your tenant. Let's take if in your Azure tenant, in your Office 365 Teams tenant, with that open graph model, you apply an LLM model to your data, to your context. I think in the morning, I think Rohan, if someone was mentioning it, both of them talk about context, right? How do you bring context to data? I think the LLM, it's like teaching English to someone in school, correct? So you have a conversational language understanding model, which understands a lot of things and you've trained it on a large public data set. Now you can take it and start to say, okay, can it start to go and build insurance? Talk about insurance form example, correct? Or it could even be a customer service use case, correct? Can it start to do better interactions with, because see, most of our banks, correct, today we have to wait in the call center because of course this is taking time. Can you take some of this load off truly interactive way? There are things you could do better than a dialogue flow chatbot, where it's more interactive. So I think the value is going to come in, Phil, when we put it into your tenant and your environment. I think, and that's where I think later part of the year when all these services become GA, I think companies, when they start to use this in context of their data sets, that's where the real value is going to come in. The public one will keep happening, correct? Kids will think that they can do homework and other stuff. That those things can keep happening, correct? Yep.
I keep getting these creative spams, people pitching me things. They're so good now, they make you click on them. And I'm starting to wonder if these are coming from people now or even GPT models, some of these are. Anyway, I've got one final question, because I know we're running out of time, but it's simply, when you look at the future for ambitious technologists and maybe ambitious business people, what's your advice, maybe start with the tech side, on how to maybe build more relevance with business context and applying technology, and then maybe on the flip side, when you advise business executives on how can they understand and leverage technology better, as you see things shift, what's your advice to both parties?
I don't think, Phil, I'm in a good position to advise. I can share my view. Still, I think advice is, I don't think I've reached the wisdom state till now, so I'm still in that whole journey. I think what I have experienced till now is, if you're a technologist, you have to become a business technologist. It means you have to understand, and I always use the word, the CTO has to be someone who could really, or any tech role, to become a business tech, understand the impact of what you're creating. And because you understand complex things, you can go and understand the simplification aspect with the business. I think, to credit, I think the business side of the world has adopted and learned technology quite faster than what we all think. Trust me, I think the line of business understands tech, and a lot of the new talent coming into the business side, they understand technology very, very well. I think the most important thing for me is curiosity. I think if all of us, if we can adopt this philosophy of learn, unlearn, and relearn, which means we continuously learn things, we unlearn a few things, and we relearn. And you have to be curious, correct? Go back, and that's what I always say, that learning habit which we had in school, I think, and then also the adaptability. Someone talked about in the morning, adapt or die. I think, you could be a zebra being chased by a lion, but it could be a zebra on a motorbike, correct? You could squid away, and that's where human-machine partnership can really help. So I think curiosity, adaptability, willing to learn, pick things from outside your industry, learn from sports, other pieces, and then you could apply to your business. That's what I really, that's what worked for me till now. So I think that's the way we start thinking about it.
That's a great answer. And quantum's here in 2 to 3 years. I'm excited.
3 years, I think you'll start to see.
Yeah.
You can still work on a quantum assembler now today. You can sign up and you can start building models. I think you need to learn, go back to physics.
Yeah.
Maybe that's where some of your heritage could help.
Yes.
Yeah. Good.
Very
Thanks,
much.
Bill.
Thank you, KK.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful.